"Security! Get this woman out of here now!" Thomas, the floor manager, shouted across the showroom. The tension sliced through the luxury car dealership as Gabrielle, the black CEO, calmly reached into her designer handbag. The security guard approached, hand hovering near his radio. "I've simply asked to test drive the new Aston Martin for my son's graduation gift," Gabrielle explained, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I haven't raised my voice or been confrontational in any way." "We don't cater to people like you," Thomas sneered, his voice the only raised one in the elegant showroom. "The used car lot is 3 blocks down." The well-dressed white customers watched with a mixture of discomfort and silent complicity as the staff exchanged knowing glances. But before Gabrielle could be escorted out, something happened that would change everything at Prestige Motors forever. Gabrielle Richardson adjusted her simple linen dress as she stepped out of her modest Toyota Camry. At 45, the tech entrepreneur had built Horizon Enterprises from nothing into a billion-dollar corporation with holdings across multiple industries, including the very dealership she now approached. Today wasn't about being CEO. Today was about finding the perfect graduation gift for her son, who'd just completed his doctorate in engineering at MIT. She deliberately dressed down, wearing minimal jewelry and natural makeup. For years, she'd conducted these undercover customer visits to her various businesses, testing their service when they didn't recognize the woman who signed their paychecks. Inside Prestige Motors' Chicago showroom, Italian marble gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. The scent of leather and luxury hung in the air as soft classical music played. Well-dressed customers sipped champagne while salespeople hovered attentively around certain customers. As Gabrielle entered, conversations didn't stop, but glances lingered a beat too long. The receptionist, a young white woman named Paige, looked up briefly before returning to her computer without acknowledgement. Near the coffee bar, a young black woman named Zora Taylor watched with growing discomfort. At 24, she'd been working at Prestige for just 2 months as a junior sales associate, long enough to recognize the unspoken hierarchies that governed customer interactions. Gabrielle moved toward a stunning midnight blue Aston Martin DBS positioned on a rotating platform. The car was perfect, powerful, yet elegant, exactly what her son had dreamed of since childhood. As her fingers barely grazed the pristine paint, a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am." Thomas Whitley approached, his expression a practiced mask of professional disdain. At 38, he'd built his reputation on catering to Chicago's elite, or at least those who matched his vision of what elite should look like. "Can I help you find the exit?" he asked, not bothering to hide his contempt. Gabrielle straightened her spine. "Actually, I'm interested in the Aston Martin for my son." Thomas laughed, the sound echoing across the showroom. "Your son?" He glanced around at his staff, several of whom had gathered to watch. "Ma'am, this vehicle costs $350,000. Perhaps you're confused about where you are." A well-dressed white couple nearby whispered to each other. The woman shook her head with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. "I'm perfectly aware of the price," Gabrielle replied evenly. "I'd like to speak with someone who can arrange a test drive." Thomas's smirk widened. "I'm the floor manager. I determine who gets to test drive our vehicles, and I'm telling you that you're wasting everyone's time." He gestured broadly. "Look around you. Do you see anyone else dressed like they just came from Target?" The laughter from the gathered staff stung like salt in an open wound. Gabrielle felt her heart rate quicken, not from anger but from profound disappointment. These were her employees, people whose healthcare benefits she'd personally expanded last quarter. From across the showroom, Zora watched with growing horror. She'd seen Thomas's behavior before, but never so blatantly discriminatory. Her hands trembled as she clutched her tablet, wanting desperately to intervene but knowing her probationary period wasn't over. "I'd like to speak with your general manager," Gabrielle said calmly. "He's not available," Thomas replied. "And even if he was, he'd tell you the same thing. We have a certain clientele here at Prestige Motors." An older white man in an expensive suit approached, curiosity piqued by the confrontation. "Is there a problem, Thomas?" "No problem, Mr. Harrington. Just explaining to this lady that she might be more comfortable elsewhere." Mr. Harrington looked Gabrielle up and down, his expression hardening. "I see. Well, we don't want to waste anyone's time, do we?" The humiliation deepened as other customers began to stare openly. A woman clutched her designer purse closer, as if Gabrielle might snatch it. Thomas wasn't finished. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Let me save you some embarrassment. There's a nice used car lot about 5 miles from here. They've got some reliable vehicles that might be more in your tax bracket." Gabrielle pulled out her phone, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen as she typed a message to her executive assistant. "Emergency board meeting. Prestige Motors, 1 hour. Bring Harrison and legal team." "Sir," she said to Thomas, her voice calm but carrying a new edge, "I'd like your full name for my records." "Thomas Whitley, floor manager," he replied with mocking formality. "And now I'm going to have to insist you leave before I call security." "Please do," Gabrielle replied. "I'll wait." Thomas's face flushed with anger as he pulled out his phone and called security. "We have a situation at the main showroom. Uncooperative customer refusing to leave." The security guard who arrived was a professional named Rafael Diaz, who'd been working security for 20 years. As he approached, his experienced eye took in the situation, a well-dressed, composed woman being confronted by an agitated manager and a crowd of onlookers. "Ma'am," Rafael said respectfully, "I've been asked to escort you out. I'd appreciate your cooperation." Gabrielle nodded. "I understand you're doing your job, Rafael." She glanced at his name tag. "But I want everyone here to remember what happened today." As she walked toward the exit, Zora finally found her courage. "This is wrong," she said, loud enough for Thomas to hear. "She didn't do anything wrong." Thomas whirled on her, face flushed. "You want to join her outside? Because that can be arranged. You're still on probation, remember?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Other staff members looked away, unwilling to risk their commissions by supporting Zora. Outside, as Raphael walked her to her car, Gabrielle spoke quietly. "Raphael, what's your full name?" "Rafael Diaz, ma'am." "Raphael, you seem like a decent man. In about an hour, things are going to change dramatically here. When they do, remember that you treated me with respect." Raphael looked puzzled but nodded. There was something in Gabrielle's voice, a quiet authority that suggested this wasn't over. As Gabrielle drove away in her Toyota, her phone began buzzing with responses to her text. Board members were clearing schedules, executives were asking questions, and the machinery of corporate accountability was beginning to turn. Exactly 1 hour later, a convoy of black SUVs pulled into Prestige Motors' parking lot. From the first vehicle emerged Gabrielle, now dressed in a perfectly tailored Armani suit, her natural hair now complemented by diamond earrings that cost more than most people's cars. From the other vehicles came an entourage that made Thomas's blood run cold. Board members, corporate lawyers, and executives whose presence at any business usually meant someone was about to lose everything. Inside the dealership, Thomas was still riding high on his earlier victory, regaling a customer with the story of how he'd handled the situation. His laughter died in his throat as he saw the procession entering through the glass doors. "What the hell?" he muttered, setting down his champagne flute. Gabrielle walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who owned everything she surveyed, because she did. Behind her, Harrison Wells, the company's chief legal officer, carried a tablet loaded with employment contracts and termination paperwork. The showroom fell silent. Customers stopped mid-conversation. Staff members froze at their desks. Thomas stepped forward, confusion and the first flutter of real fear creeping into his voice. "Ma'am, I thought I made it clear earlier that I didn't belong in my own dealership," Gabrielle interrupted, her voice carrying easily across the showroom. The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. His face went white as the implications sank in. "Your dealership?" he stammered. Gabrielle smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My name is Gabrielle Richardson. I'm the CEO and founder of Horizon Enterprises, which owns Prestige Motors and 32 other dealerships across the country. And this morning, I was denied service in my own business because of the color of my skin." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Mr. Harrington, who had supported Thomas earlier, suddenly became intensely interested in his shoes. Harrison Wells stepped forward, his voice crisp and professional. "Mr. Whitley, as of this moment, your employment with Horizon Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out after you clean out your desk." "Wait," Thomas said, panic creeping into his voice. "This is a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job, protecting our brand from—" "From what?" Gabrielle asked quietly. "From a black woman who wanted to buy a car for her son, from someone who didn't match your idea of what wealth should look like?" The customers who had earlier enjoyed the spectacle of Gabrielle's humiliation now found themselves witnesses to something far more uncomfortable. The woman who had clutched her purse tighter now looked as if she wanted to disappear entirely. Zora, still standing near her desk, felt tears streaming down her face, not tears of sadness, but of vindication. She had known something was wrong, had felt it in her bones, and had spoken up despite the risk. "Ms. Richardson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I tried to say something, but—" Gabrielle turned to her, and for the first time since returning, her expression softened. "What's your name?" "Zora Taylor, ma'am." "Zora, you have nothing to apologize for. In fact, I'd like to speak with you about taking over as floor manager." As Thomas was escorted out by security, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, Gabrielle addressed the remaining staff and customers. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of authority that comes from building an empire from nothing. "What happened here today isn't just about me," she began. "It's about every person who's ever been judged by their appearance, dismissed because of their race, or made to feel less than human because someone else decided they didn't belong." The showroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the customers who had earlier participated in her humiliation now looked ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. "This dealership will undergo immediate changes," Gabrielle continued. "We'll implement comprehensive diversity training for all staff. We'll establish clear policies about how every customer, regardless of appearance, will be treated with dignity and respect." Harrison nodded, making notes on his tablet. "I'll have the new protocols drafted by tomorrow morning." Gabrielle turned to Zora, who was still processing the dramatic turn of events. "Miss Taylor, I'd like to offer you the position of floor manager. You showed integrity today when it would have been easier to stay silent. That's the kind of leadership this place needs." Zora's eyes widened in shock. "Ms. Richardson, I don't know what to say. I've only been here 2 months." "Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who haven't been corrupted by a broken system," Gabrielle replied. "You'll have full support and training." 3 weeks later, Prestige Motors looked almost identical from the outside. Same marble floors, same luxury cars, same classical music playing in the background. But everything that truly mattered had changed. Zora Taylor stood near the reception desk, now wearing the confident bearing of someone who belonged exactly where she was. In her first weeks as floor manager, she had implemented a customer service philosophy based on one simple principle. Every person who walked through those doors deserved to be treated with dignity. The diversity training had been intense but necessary. Some staff members had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. Others had struggled with their own unconscious biases, and a few had quietly sought employment elsewhere. Gabrielle had returned several times, sometimes in her business suits, sometimes in casual clothes, always observing how her new policies were being implemented. Today was special, though. Today she was bringing her son to pick up his graduation gift. Dr. Julian Richardson walked into the dealership with the confidence of someone who had just earned his doctorate from one of the world's most prestigious universities. At 26, he carried himself with the poise of someone destined for greatness, but more importantly, with the compassion his mother had instilled in him. "Mom told me what happened here," he said to Zora as they walked toward the Aston Martin. "I'm proud of how you stood up for what was right." Zora smiled, still sometimes amazed at how dramatically her life had changed. "Your mother gave me an opportunity to be part of the solution. That's not something I take lightly." As they completed the paperwork for Julian's new car, Gabrielle reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The humiliation she'd experienced had been painful, but it had also been necessary, a catalyst for changes that would benefit countless future customers. "You know," Julian said as he signed the final documents, "this car is beautiful, but the real gift is the lesson you taught everyone here, that discrimination has consequences, but so does standing up for what's right." Gabrielle nodded, watching as customers of all races and backgrounds were being served with the same level of respect and attention. An elderly black couple was being shown a luxury sedan by a salesperson who hung on their every word. A young Latino man in work clothes was test driving a sports car. "Change is possible," Gabrielle said quietly, "but it requires people to be brave enough to demand it." As Julian drove his new Aston Martin out of the lot, Gabrielle lingered for a moment, watching the dealership continue its transformation. The work wasn't complete. Changing hearts and minds takes time, but it had begun. And every time someone shared the story of what happened at Prestige Motors, it served as a reminder that one person's courage to stand up against injustice can create ripples that change entire organizations.